Welcome to Story Planet, where we bring you relaxing tales to help you unwind. Tonight's story is A Harvest Moon Thanksgiving. So, settle in, get cozy, and let yourself be carried away into a world of peace and warmth. Now, let's begin. The air carried the familiar chill of late November, crisp and clean, as it whispered through the bare branches of the oak trees that lined the old farmhouse. Hannah stood on the porch, her hands wrapped around a warm cup of tea, watching as the sun began its slow descent beyond the horizon. The sky was awash in golden hues, and soon the great harvest moon would rise, casting its pale, luminous light over the fields that stretched out in every direction. It was Thanksgiving, a day that had always held a special place in Hannah's heart. There was something about this time of year that brought with it a quiet sense of gratitude, a feeling that life, with all its ups and downs, was still full of beauty and blessings. The farmhouse, nestled in the heart of the countryside, had been her family's home for generations, and each Thanksgiving they gathered here, filling the old house with warmth, laughter, and the smell of good food. This year, though, things were different. The farmhouse was quieter now. Her parents had moved into town to be closer to the comforts of modern life, and her siblings were scattered across the country, their lives busy with their own families. But Hannah had chosen to stay. This place, with its wide-open fields and timeless rhythm, was where she felt most at peace. It was where she had always felt connected to something larger than herself, a sense of belonging that only the land could provide. As she stood there, sipping her tea, she thought about the Thanksgivings of her childhood, when the house had been full of people and energy. She could still hear the echoes of her mother's voice calling them in from the fields, the sound of her father chopping wood for the fireplace, and the laughter of her siblings as they played games by the fire. Those were simpler times, when the worries of the world seemed far away, and the day was spent celebrating the harvest and the abundance of the land. Tonight, it would just be her and a few close friends who had made the journey out to the farm. They had promised to arrive in time for dinner, bringing with them baskets of fresh vegetables and pies made with fruit from the orchard. It wouldn't be the large, bustling Thanksgiving gatherings of the past, but Hannah found comfort in the quiet. There was something about this time of year, under the light of the harvest moon, that invited reflection and stillness, a time to be grateful for the simple joys of life. The sun dipped lower, and as the last rays of light painted the sky in shades of pink and purple, Hannah turned and made her way inside. The warmth of the farmhouse enveloped her as she stepped through the door, the smell of roasting turkey and herbs filling the air. The kitchen, with its worn wooden countertops and open hearth, had always been the heart of the home, a place where meals were prepared with care and love. Tonight, it was no different. The long wooden table in the dining room was already set, the linen cloth her grandmother had embroidered draped across it, and candles flickering softly in the center. The room was filled with the soft glow of the fire and the quiet hum of the oven in the background. Hannah smiled to herself as she placed a basket of fresh bread on the table, It was a small gathering this year, but it was perfect in its simplicity. As she worked, the house seemed to come alive around her, filled with the comforting sounds of home, the crackling of the fire, the soft whistle of the kettle, and the faint creak of the floorboards as she moved through the rooms. It was as though the house itself was breathing, settling into the rhythm of the evening. Outside, the harvest moon had begun to rise, its pale light casting long shadows across the fields. The land, with its rolling hills and bare trees, seemed to glow under the moon's gentle touch, as if the earth itself was giving thanks for the season's bounty. Hannah paused by the window, watching the moon's ascent, her heart full of quiet gratitude. The sound of tires crunching on the gravel driveway pulled her from her thoughts, and she turned to see headlights approaching through the trees. Her friends had arrived. Hannah made her way to the front door, stepping out onto the porch just as the car came to a stop. The door opened, and out stepped Anna, her oldest and dearest friend, bundled up against the cold, with a wide smile on her face. "Happy Thanksgiving, Hannah," Anna called, as she made her way up the porch steps, carrying a basket filled with freshly baked pies. "Happy Thanksgiving," Hannah replied, embracing her warmly. "I'm so glad you made it." "Wouldn't miss it for the world," Anna said with a grin. "It wouldn't be Thanksgiving without your farm and that famous turkey of yours." Behind Anna, David and Rachel, a couple Hannah had known for years, emerged from the car, their arms full of baskets and bottles of wine. The four of them had shared many Thanksgivings together, and each year they looked forward to this simple gathering at the farmhouse, where the world seemed to slow down, and they could savor the beauty of the season. They made their way inside, their laughter filling the house as they shed their coats and boots, placing the baskets of food on the kitchen counter. The warmth of the fire and the smell of the meal already cooking enveloped them, and for a moment they simply stood there, taking it all in. "Everything smells amazing," Rachel said, breathing in deeply. "This place is just magical." Hannah smiled. "It's the house. It always knows when it's Thanksgiving." Together, they worked to prepare the final touches for the meal. Anna sliced the bread, while David opened a bottle of wine, and Rachel arranged the pies on the sideboard. The air was filled with the comforting sounds of friends talking and the clatter of dishes being set on the table. It was a scene that felt timeless, like something out of a memory, where the present and the past blurred together under the soft glow of the candles. As the meal came together, Hannah felt a sense of peace settle over her. The house was warm and inviting, the fire crackling softly in the hearth, and outside, the moon continued its ascent, casting a pale light over the world. It was a Thanksgiving, unlike the ones of her childhood, but in its own way, it felt even more meaningful. It was a reminder that, even as life changed, the simple joys of gathering with loved ones and sharing a meal remained constant. They sat down to dinner just as the moon reached its highest point in the sky, its silver light streaming through the windows and mingling with the golden glow of the candles. The table was filled with food, roasted turkey, mashed potatoes, and vegetables fresh from the garden. The air was filled with the scent of rosemary and thyme, and the soft sound of forks and knives against plates. For a while, they ate in comfortable silence, the only sounds the crackle of the fire and the soft hum of the wind outside. It was a moment of quiet contentment, where the worries of the world felt distant, and the only thing that mattered was the warmth of the meal and the company of friends. After dinner, they lingered at the table, their plates cleared, but their glasses of wine still full. The conversation flowed easily, touching on memories of past Thanksgivings, stories of the year gone by, and hopes for the year ahead. It was a moment of reflection, of looking back on the challenges and joys of the year, and looking forward to the possibilities that the future held. Hannah listened, her heart full as her friends spoke. There was something about Thanksgiving, especially one celebrated under the light of the harvest moon, that invited gratitude. It was a time to pause, to look around and appreciate the blessings in life, no matter how small or how simple. Eventually, the conversation drifted toward the harvest moon itself, its pale light still streaming through the windows, bathing the room in its glow. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" Anna said, her voice soft as she gazed out the window. "There's something so peaceful about it." Hannah nodded. "I always feel like the harvest moon has a kind of magic to it. It's like it's watching over us, reminding us to slow down and be thankful." David smiled. "It feels like time stops when the moon is like this. Everything seems to settle, and all the noise of life just fades away." They all fell quiet for a moment, each of them lost in their thoughts as they gazed out at the moonlit fields. The night had deepened, and the land outside was still and silent, the trees casting long shadows across the snow-dusted ground. Hannah felt a sense of peace wash over her as she looked out at the moonlit landscape. This was why she had stayed on the farm, why she had chosen this life of quiet simplicity. There was a rhythm to the land, a kind of peace that could only be found in the stillness of the countryside, and it was moments like this, under the light of the harvest moon, that made her feel truly connected to the world around her. After a while, they moved into the living room, gathering around the fire with cups of tea and slices of pie. The warmth of the hearth filled the room, and the soft light of the fire flickered across the walls, casting dancing shadows that seemed to mirror the rhythm of the flames. Hannah settled into her favorite armchair, a blanket draped over her lap as she sipped her tea, feeling the warmth seep into her hands. The room around her was filled with a soft golden glow, the fire crackling in the hearth, casting flickers of light across the walls. Her friends had gathered close, their voices hushed as they spoke, the rhythm of the conversation blending with the peaceful hum of the night. Anna sat on the floor beside the fire, her back resting against the couch, her legs tucked under her. David and Rachel had claimed the large sofa, their hands intertwined as they shared stories about their plans for the coming year. The conversation drifted from one topic to another, each moment more relaxed than the last, as the evening stretched on under the soft light of the harvest moon. Hannah glanced out the window, her gaze drawn once more to the silver glow that bathed the fields in light. The moon had risen higher now, and its soft luminescence gave the landscape an ethereal quality, casting shadows that seemed to move gently with the wind. It was a sight that filled her heart with quiet wonder, a reminder of the beauty that could be found in the simplest of moments. "I've always loved the harvest moon," Rachel said softly, her eyes following Hannah's gaze. "It feels like it brings a kind of peace with it, like the world is holding its breath, waiting for something beautiful to unfold." David nodded, his expression thoughtful. "There's something timeless about it. It's the same moon our ancestors watched rise over their fields, the same moon that guided their harvests. It connects us to the past, to a simpler time when life was about the land, about living in rhythm with the earth." Hannah smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet sense of gratitude. This was why she had always felt drawn to the farm, to the life it offered. There was a rhythm here, a connection to something deeper, something older than herself. It was a life that moved with the seasons, where each day was shaped by the sun, the wind, and the rain. And in moments like this, under the light of the harvest moon, she felt that connection more deeply than ever. As the fire crackled softly, Anna shifted in her seat, a playful smile tugging at her lips. "You know," she began, her voice light, "I think it's time for one of our famous Thanksgiving traditions." David raised an eyebrow, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Oh? And which one would that be?" "The gratitude circle," Anna said with a grin, glancing around the room. "We used to do it every year when we were younger. Remember? Everyone shares one thing they're grateful for." Rachel chuckled, nodding in agreement. "I do remember that. It's been a long time, but I think it's a tradition worth reviving." Hannah smiled, her heart warming at the thought. The gratitude circle had been one of her favorite parts of Thanksgiving as a child. It was a simple tradition, but one that had always left her feeling connected to her family, to the land, and to the quiet blessings that filled her life. "All right," she said, settling back in her chair. "I'll start." She paused for a moment, her gaze drifting back to the window, to the moonlit fields and the quiet landscape that stretched out before her. "I'm grateful for this place," she said softly, her voice carrying a note of reverence. "For the farm, for the land, and for the peace it brings me. I'm grateful for the way it grounds me, for the way it reminds me to slow down and appreciate the simple things in life." There was a quiet murmur of agreement from her friends, and after a moment, Rachel spoke. "I'm grateful for the people in my life," she said, her voice warm. "For the friendships that have stood the test of time, for the family that supports me, and for the love I've been lucky enough to find." David nodded, his hand resting gently on Rachel's. "And I'm grateful for this moment," he added softly, "for the chance to be here, under this moon, with people who mean the world to me. It's easy to get caught up in the busyness of life, but nights like this remind me of what's truly important." Anna, always the last to speak, smiled as she looked around the room. "I'm grateful for all of you," she said, her eyes bright with affection, "for the way we've grown together, for the memories we've shared, and for the future that's still waiting for us. Life isn't always easy, but with friends like you, it's always full of love and laughter." The room fell quiet after that, the air filled with the unspoken gratitude that hung between them. It was a moment of connection, a moment of reflection, where the weight of the past year seemed to lift, leaving only the warmth of the present. Outside, the harvest moon continued to cast its silver light over the fields, a quiet reminder of the beauty that surrounded them. After a while, the conversation drifted back to lighter topics, the mood in the room shifting as they shared stories and memories from Thanksgivings past. Laughter filled the air as they recounted tales of childhood mischief, of burnt pies and overcooked turkeys, of long walks through the fields and games played by the fire. The night stretched on, and as the fire in the hearth began to burn low, Hannah felt a deep sense of contentment settle over her. The house was filled with the warmth of friendship, the kind of warmth that could only come from years of shared experiences, from the bonds that had been forged over time. Eventually, the fire burned down to embers, and the room grew quiet once more. One by one, her friends began to drift off to bed, their footsteps soft as they made their way down the hallway to their rooms. Hannah stayed behind for a few moments, lingering by the fire, her eyes half closed as she watched the flames dance in the hearth. The house was still now, the only sound the faint whisper of the wind outside, and the soft rustle of the trees as they swayed under the light of the moon. Hannah wrapped the blanket around her shoulders and stood, making her way to the window one last time. The harvest moon had begun its slow descent, but it still hung high in the sky, its light casting a silvery glow over the world below. The fields, the trees, the old barn in the distance, they all seemed to shimmer under the moon's gentle touch, as if they too were giving thanks for the season's bounty. Hannah smiled softly to herself, feeling the quiet peace of the night settle into her bones. This was what Thanksgiving was truly about, she realized. Not the grand feasts or the bustling gatherings, but the quiet moments of reflection, the simple joys of being surrounded by the people you love, and the deep sense of gratitude that filled your heart. With one last glance at the moonlit landscape, Hannah turned and made her way to bed, the warmth of the farmhouse wrapping around her like a blanket. The house was quiet now, the fire reduced to a soft glow in the hearth, and outside, the harvest moon continued its slow journey across the sky. As she slipped under the covers, Hannah felt a quiet warmth settle within her, a feeling that all was right in the world. The year had been long, filled with its own challenges and uncertainties, but in this moment, under the light of the harvest moon, she felt at ease. And as she drifted off to sleep, her heart full of gratitude, she knew that this Thanksgiving would be one she would remember for years to come. Thank you from Story Planet. If you felt the warmth of the harvest moon and the calm of the evening, consider giving a thumbs up. And if it's worth sharing, feel free to send it to friends and family. If you haven't already, subscribe for more relaxing stories to help you unwind daily, have a peaceful night, and sweet dreams.